What is up, besties, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Scotty Holiday. I'm a queer creator and a huge Star Wars nerd, so if you're into either one of those things, please consider subscribing, liking, and following me on social media at Scotty Holiday SW for all my latest Star Wars content. Recently, I have finally been getting into Shadows of the Sith and rewatching the Sequel Trilogy, and it's got me thinking about the new Jedi Order movie that was recently announced at Star Wars Celebration 2023. We also got a recent interview with Daisy Ridley where she had mentioned that she knows the story of the new movie, and so I decided I want to talk about it in today's video. So the first thing I want to talk about is what we know so far. So the new Jedi Order movie is set 15 years after the rise of Skywalker, in 50 ABY to be exact, starring Daisy Ridley as Rey and her attempt to try and rebuild the Jedi Order. The movie's going to be directed by Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, and it's written by Stephen Knight. The release date currently is unknown, but it's predicted to be the May 2026 date, and this is actually going to be Star Wars' return to the cinema, coming out 7 years after the Rise of Skywalker released. So in general, I love that we're getting a time jump, because that was one of the things that I was kind of meh about when it came to the sequel trilogy. I would kind of wished more time passed in between, just so we could really grow with those characters more. So I'm excited that this movie is going to be 15 years from the Rise of Skywalker, and I'm just excited, to see what the galaxy is going to look like at that point in time. I'm also excited just to have Star Wars back in the theater, and I think this is going to be a really fun way to welcome Star Wars back. When asked about what the movie would entail during Celebration 2023 in an interview with IGN, Kathleen Kennedy said, "We're post-war, post-First Order, and the Jedi are in disarray. There's a lot of discussion around who are the Jedi, what are they doing, what's the state of the galaxy. Rey's attempting to rebuild the Jedi Order based on the books, based on what she promised Luke, so that's where we're going." Then more recently, in November of 2023, in an interview with Collider, Daisy Ridley was asked about the film, and she said, "The story is really cool. I'm waiting to read a script because obviously I don't have any other updates. It's not what I expected, but I'm very excited. I know the storyline for one film. That's not to say that's all it is, but that's what I was told about. And I imagine it will be the next film, I think. I mean, again, I don't know, post-strikes and everything, how quickly everything will start up again. But yes, so far I know the story of one film, and I think people will be very excited." So of course we know that Rey is going to be in this movie, and she's going to be a big focal point, but what other characters do we think we're going to see? The first one I have to mention, and I feel like this is a given, is Finn. We all know Finn was kind of slated to be a much bigger character in the promotion up to the sequel trilogy than what we actually got in his arc. It is confirmed that he's Force sensitive, however, it was never mentioned in the film in The Rise of Skywalker.
Rey, I never told you when!
However, we did see in the LEGO specials that Finn is training under Rey. Granted, they're not canon, but it shows that, Star Wars and Lucasfilm is like, people want to see Finn as a Jedi. I'd really love to see Jedi Finn. I really like Finn as a character, and I'd really like to kind of just get a redemption, not only for the character, but also for John Boyega, because he had some things to say about how things were on set with his character, how he was treated, so I think he's due a redemption. On top of that, I also want to see Ben Solo. Obviously, we know Ben Solo died at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, shortly after being redeemed. So, it follows that Star Wars trope of character gets redeemed, and then they die. Well, I think that we could see Ben Solo again. And I think a really cool way to do that, and actually have him not just as like a Force ghost, but to actually be brought back to life, which I know, that's a lot, but I kind of want to see him brought back to life through the dyad. Like Palpatine describes,
"A dyad in the Force, a power like life itself."
So, if Rey and Kylo are a dyad in the Force, it's not far to say that the Force could bring Kylo back to life. Like, it's so easy, just the Force dyad. The Force says, no, these two pieces need to be together, and it wasn't Ben's time. So I know that's controversial. I don't know if it'll happen. I'll be super excited if it does happen. If it doesn't and he's just dead, that's fine too. On top of that, we have our other big sequel trilogy characters that I'd love to see. Poe Dameron's a big one. There's Rose Tico. I really enjoyed Janna as well, and there was kind of some hints that she may or may not be Force sensitive as well, so I think she'd be a really cool character to explore more. There's a lot of cool characters that we could talk about. Of course, I think it'd be fun to see Chewbacca. However, I think he also kind of deserves a little bit of a break. Let him go back to Kashyyyk, spend his time with his family that he probably hasn't seen in God knows how long, if they're even canon. I'd be excited to see him regardless. Of course, we have to mention the droids. I'd love to see BB-8. C-3PO and R2-D2, they'll find a way to put them in the movie if they want to. Let's be honest. Like, I love them, but I don't necessarily think we need them in this movie. So on top of the characters that are more expected to be seen, who is still around and alive in the galaxy at this time? First and foremost, I feel like the most popular character that people are going to point out is Grogu. I did the math, Grogu would be like 91. So he's still going to be very young probably. Hopefully he'll at least be talking at this point. He and Rey are just powerful Force users, so I think that they would kind of notice each other's signatures through the Force. I think somehow that would bring them together at some point. Speaking of somebody else who is super old and has seen it all, literally, is Huyang. Now, I love Huyang. I think he was a great addition to the Ahsoka series, and because he's been around for so long and knows so much about the Jedi Order, who would be better to help Rey rebuild it that's still around? Like, I think he would be a perfect addition. Like, people are already speculating that he could be in the Dawn of the Jedi movie, the Mandoverse movie, and this movie, the New Jedi Order, as the perfect kind of like thread line all the way through. So, on top of that, I think he would just make as a great advisor because he knows so much about the Jedi and he's been there for so long. He knows all the protocol. He knows what worked and what didn't. So I think he'd be a really fun character to have working with Rey as well. And he's been introduced in live action, so they can definitely bring him in. I think another cool character from the sequels that they could bring in would be Maz Kanata. We know she's alive. We know she worked with the Resistance. And she mentioned in The Force Awakens, she has that line,
"I am no Jedi, but I know the Force."
So I think she'd be a cool character to have around as well. Not as a Jedi, but as a character that could also be like an advisor to Rey or just somebody they go to for help, like they do in The Force Awakens. I'd like the character a lot. I love Lupita Nyong'o, and I'd love to get more of that character because I think she's really fun and interesting. We don't get to know a ton about her, and she says she knows the Force, so let's explore that. And then last but not least, we have Lando. At this point, Lando would be 81. I don't see why we couldn't bring him back. And on top of that, I've talked about this on my podcast, This is the Way Seekers, but I don't even think they were going to bring Lando back for the sequels until they were kind of scrambling on what to do for The Rise of Skywalker. I think they should do right by Billy D. Williams, and if he's down, let him continue to play Lando and give him a part in this new Jedi Order movie. Hell, maybe he and Chewie could be together, kind of like they were in The Rise of Skywalker, and going off on their own missions in the Falcon. And they could be somebody that Rey has to call on for assistance on something. On top of that, there was the whole Janna is Lando's daughter theory, so they could explore that if they wanted to explore that more, which I think that'd be cool too. Like I said, I'm in the middle of reading Shadows of the Sith, so I'm really liking the Janna-Lando connection. They don't even have to be related. Like I said, he's just a cool character that I'd like to see more of, and I think he was criminally underutilized in the sequel trilogy, so let's get him back. Now, some more wildcard characters that I guess I could say they're around, but I don't necessarily expect to see. First and foremost, we've got Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa Solo, and Yoda. Obviously, if they appear, they would be Force ghosts, but I know Kathleen Kennedy had mentioned in another interview that there's not going to be a ton of Force ghosts in the movie. If anybody showed up, I would imagine it would be Luke or Yoda, and I'm kind of leaning more towards Yoda, just because Yoda reaches out to Ezra in Rebels when Ezra is trying to find his way and needs that higher wisdom that his master just couldn't give him because he didn't have the experience. So I could see where Rey's trying to rebuild the Order. Who better to give her tips than the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, Yoda? Not only could he give her advice on what was good and what worked, but he could also give her advice on how things needed to change and how, due to their hubris and dogma, the Jedi, were a part of their own downfall. I think he would be great to pull in as somebody to reach out to Rey. Plus, there's no weird, Yoda's not based on a real person, so there's no weird permissions that have to be done. There's no deep faking. That would just be, honestly, the cleaner route. But I think it would also make sense. We probably won't see any of them, but we'll just have to wait and see. Some other characters that are around and presumably alive, Ahsoka Tano, obviously. I did the math, she'd be about 86, which, based on a couple different sources for Torgruda, they say if they have a good connection to the Force, they can live up to 200 years. She may or may not be a Force god. She probably is never going to die. So I think she could be another kind of wise master to come in and help Rey. We have, of course, speaking of Ahsoka, we have Ezra, who'd be about 69, as well as Sabine, who would be 71. They're both Force users, so if they're still alive, which as of right now in canon they are, I kind of would rather see Ezra than Sabine if I'm being honest. But I think they would both be good characters to bring in that could provide some help for Rey with her order. Also, keeping in with the Ahsoka characters, another one would be Jacen Syndulla. Now, Jacen, I almost feel like if they're going to bring anybody in from Ahsoka who could actually play into the story as more of a character, Jacen I think has the most potential. He'd only be 50 at this point. And we already know he's Force sensitive, he wants to be a Jedi. I think he'd be a great character to explore further, and on top of that, we don't have as much established lore with him, so they can kind of go in many different ways with the character. The only issue we run into with these Ahsoka series characters or Mandoverse characters in general is that the Mandoverse movie is slated to come out the same year as this new Jedi Order movie in 2026. However, it's going to come out after, most likely in that December. So if these characters appear in the new Jedi Order movie, then we know that they survive the Mandoverse kind of culmination climax movie. If they don't appear, that could also mean maybe they die in the Mandoverse movie. With Dave Filoni's recent promotion as Chief Creative Officer, who knows, maybe they have more of a chance of appearing in the sequel trilogy or post-sequel trilogy era now because he has his hand in it and can kind of implement more of his characters and just other characters that are around in these time frames that would make sense. And then, like, the real bottom of the list wild cards, we've got Cal Kestis. We don't know his fate even during the original trilogy at this point, but as far as we know, in his canon stories, he's alive, and he'd be about 82, so he could still be around. And then, this is like a real wild card. With Skeleton Crew, Jude Law's character is most likely a Jedi, if not already confirmed to be a Jedi, so he's another character that could be brought into it, but we know, like, virtually nothing about him, so... But I figured I'd include him on the list anyway. So now that we've talked about our characters, our heroes, let's talk about who's the villain of this movie gonna be. Kathleen Kennedy had said, "This movie will see the Jedi in chaos as the galaxy tries to decide whether or not it needs the Order in the wake of decades of chaos and conflict." I could see another Force sect coming in and being like, no, we don't want the Jedi to come back because look at what they've done to the galaxy. On top of, the Sith were created because they were a splinter group of the Jedi who fell to the dark side. So there's a big part of that argument right there. Or it could just be the people of the galaxy in general. The government is like, no, we don't want the Jedi to come back because of what happened in all of galactic history. A more out-of-the-box villain could be like the Yuuzhan Vong or the Grisk if they're still around. We've got options for villains, but I feel like it's a bit harder to speculate, and I'm very interested to see what they come up with for the villains of this movie. Now, some of my overall hopes and wants for this movie is new distinct imagery that doesn't necessarily harken to one era of Star Wars. It's pretty clear the sequel trilogy pulled mostly from the original trilogy. Not only was that at the time what they thought was the beloved trilogy, everyone hated the prequels, which is not the case. We need a good blend of all the different eras, whether that's from the High Republic, the Old Republic, the prequels, the original trilogy, even the sequel trilogy, and then also give us some other new cool concepts as well that make sense for the time frame. Speaking of new looks, please give Rey a new cool outfit. She basically wears the same outfit throughout the sequel trilogy in different colors. She starts in tan, then she goes to gray, then she goes to white. I know Daisy Ridley's been keeping her hair really short. I think that could be just a big difference, or just give her something more along the lines of robes. Or I think Seer Junda's outfit in Jedi Survivor is a very cool take on a Force user outfit that's not your traditional robes, but that's not also like a pedestrian, everyday kind of look. I'm just really excited about this movie because we're going somewhere new. It's brand new territory. Sure, we're going to have sequel trilogy characters that are going to be a part of it, but we're 15 years in the future. The possibilities are endless, and that's something I'm really excited about. But what do you think of this new Jedi Order movie, and are you even excited about it? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments, or join my Discord to keep the conversation going together. Make sure to like, subscribe, and consider following me on social media at Scotty Holiday SW for all my latest Star Wars content. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.